born and raised here, or did your family come here, or how did you wind up
Um,
in Selinsgrove?
yeah, so I lived in Bristol outside of Philadelphia for a couple years,
Uh,
and then my mom started to go to um, Pennsylvania College of Technology or something like that. So I lived in Williamsport for another couple of years, and then I moved to Selinsgrove at the end of my third grade.
okay.
Yeah, so I've been here for a while.
Sierra, I guess you said you were here in third grade. What do you remember about maybe the first time you may have been singled out or made to feel different by someone else just because of the color of your skin? And how old were you? Do you remember?
Yeah, the bus was a brutal place, and I was on there for like an hour because I was the first one to get picked up. So I think it was about probably fifth grade, and my mother is African American, and my dad's Puerto Rican, so I have a little bit of a blend. And my mom was definitely through action communicating to me that it was better to whitewash myself. There was
What do you
uh,
mean? Can you explain that?
yeah, hair is a big thing in the African community, and uh, I could never really embrace who I was because, afros aren't seen as professional. Even like up until last year, I applied for a job at a camp and I had on the form like no dreads and etc. because it's just seen as unkept or um, not clean or not professional when that's not true. Like we know how to take care of our hair. So from a young age, very young age, as early as I can remember, like for school pictures, it was always like relaxer, straightened, and so my hair was pretty much dead. And I thought that maybe I would be appreciated more for my Latin roots, that would be cooler because um, it's a big issue in the African American community to have an identity crisis because we don't really have an identity um, growing up in America, and you know that your ancestors were slaves, but what part of Africa? I don't know. We don't really hold any like traditionally African cultural sort of practices, except, you know, we only really are holding like traditions of our oppressors, and so all of that like community trauma is just sort of um, passed down. So you're searching for something to ground you, and so I thought I'll be appreciated more for my Latin roots. This will be cool. Um, I'll just like learn some Spanish and then just tell everybody that I'm Puerto Rican. Um, and
And
that
this
was
happened while you were in elementary school?
uh, I was like fifth grade.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was this boy on the bus. I still remember him, Nick Stangy. And I, yeah, he moved to like New York or something. But I just remember always being a little bit different. And I think I would get picked on because I was also my family was not what like well off. I was on welfare for my whole life, and um, so like we didn't have the best foods. I was definitely like weighed more, and I was insecure about my hair, and so instead of like um, taking care of like the beautiful afro that I have now, I had like just weird like straightened and yeah. So I just remember, trying to assert that I was Puerto Rican because I thought it was cooler. I thought it would make me be more accepted, but then I don't even think they could like fathom that there were like various.
What was going on inside you? How did you feel? You must have felt terrible about
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up in an abusive home as well, so I don't live with my parents, and so I was already like wrestling with neglect and like not feeling worth the time to, have a job and to be able to have the things that I needed. And so to also be, everything was out of my control. My race was out of my control. My family situation was out of my control.
that.
And so I was really trying to find that sense of like worth and affirmation from people outside of the family.
Yeah.
And then, um, yeah, so then just being like told that like, oh, go back to Mexico, stop jumping the border, like those sort of comments, and I knew they were probably just reiterating something that they heard from their parents or some other friends, and it felt kind of hopeless to. It's a very weird place to be because I actually wrote a poem about it because I'm a poet too, but um, just being
You mean it's a weird place to be a mindset,
it's a
or
weird
being in
place to
Selinsgrove?
be in Selinsgrove, but also to be light skinned and have like different variants to my ethnicity, and so to feel like not almost not black enough for the black community, and definitely too black for the white community, and so it was just kind of this weird limbo, and yeah, um, so that was just like I mean, as a middle school, you're already disoriented with like life, and so um, yeah, I was just very, very insecure, very low self-esteem. I didn't know like why my body was different than others. Like developmentally, I didn't know why. Um, like my hair was so hard to deal with, and swimming was terrible because like hair it gets damaged so easily, and my mom didn't really teach me how to take care of my hair because she'd rather have me like hide it. So um, it was a journey. It wasn't until like my junior year of high school where I decided to try to wear my hair naturally. Um, and then I actually just decided to, we had a project in civics and government where we were supposed to do a biography like about a president and then dress up for them for extra points.
Uh,
And I wanted to do Barack Obama. So I just shaved my head. And um, it was just this really cool process of, it was almost like symbolic of me just starting completely new after my like junior senior year of high school and just deciding to embrace who I was because when I do that I feel like I'm the most beautiful that I can be, uh, and so I I just learned so much about how to take care of my hair. I bought like this curling sponge and it like sets the um, pattern of like how big you want your curls to be, sort of thing to like help it grow, and I mean it was really cool. So it's been I don't know maybe 2 or 3 years now since that, and so
Believe it or not, that was one of my questions, which I'll jump to right now. I was wondering about, the basics of this in this area. I mean, finding the right skincare products, salons that cater to African Americans.
yeah.
It take a while to find places like that. This is
I have never had my hair cut or styled professionally. In this area, uh, honestly, you're better off just finding an African American mom somewhere. Like my friend Karen, who moved here from Brooklyn, she does her daughter's hair, and
uh,
so it's basically just like trying to reach out in the community and find somebody who knows how to handle and treat African hair because I mean it's pretty laughable the sections, I guess, in the department stores or wherever you get your hair stuff, just like how very limited it is. So I mostly do my shopping like almost entirely online. Yeah. Um, because luckily I live in the age of the internet and there are a lot of like awesome black owned businesses that have taken the time to figure out what works best. So yeah, honestly, I go to a predominantly white school too,
right.
even though it's near Pittsburgh, and we have a bookstore that sells like has a little cosmetic area, and I actually um get like concealer for free because nobody ever buys the darker complexion because there's just nobody there. So I have a service scholarship, so they'll just like give leftover stuff to there to kind of like disperse in the community, so I can just kind of like grab it.
Jumping back to high school, well, just at school. Did you have any black teachers, or were there some black students in the district? I'm curious.
Yeah. Um, it's insane. I had one black teacher my entire life, and so it wasn't until I got to high school, and it was my freshman year, and I took a history and English honors class called Waglish,
Uh-huh.
and I had Harvey Edwards as like a
Yeah.
co-teacher of that
Uh-huh.
class,
Yeah.
and his presence in my life was um it was really important to me because yeah, I just remember like being seeing his passion and like the respect that people had for him, and it was really beautiful, and I felt like he maybe took special care and attention in kind of fostering my gifts or like helping them. He was just very encouraging, very impactful. He's honestly the reason why I'm a writer today, and um, he was really instrumental in me like having confidence, and he was the reason why I got like my first um, article ever published in the Daily Item. Actually, when he like made us all write and like we wrote little editorials, and I got mine published, and it like really just gave me confidence and like hope, I guess. It
Were
was
you ever in a situation where you felt like maybe threatened by police or scared that?
yeah.
Could you
I
tell me about
yeah, it wasn't here, but it was in Waynesburg where I go to college,
it?
which is it's almost like a carbon copy of this area, but a little poorer. And I was going for a walk with my boyfriend, and we accidentally trespassed because we were just like walking up this random hill because we saw like a cool little treehouse or something,
Uh huh.
and we didn't know that we were walking like onto mining property because we went in an unorthodox way, so there was no signs. So by the time we got up there, there was this guy who was like driving around a pickup truck, and he wanted to know how we got up there, and we said, "Oh, we just climbed up here. We just were checking things out." And he was like, "Oh, well, you're trespassing, so you should go." So we tried to leave, but then before we knew it, like the state police showed up, and we just kind of thought like it was a big response to like just like we had our college IDs on us, and that was it. Like we were obviously just messing around, and my boyfriend actually like I went to hold his hand because I was like, I just want to hold your hand, but he like almost pulled away, and I asked him later on like why he did that, and he was saying like in this area, and they were older too, um, that he just like didn't want them to see that we were a couple because he didn't know if that was gonna make them angry. They wouldn't like that, and so that would
Was he white?
yes, he's white.
Oh, that.
So he didn't know if that was going to like cause the situation to be worse if they didn't agree with that. Because we've gotten that before too. Somebody from around here, I ran cross country with her. Her parents were saying that like we were unequally yoked because I'm like African Spanish and he's white. I'm like, okay, that's you obviously haven't read your Bible. That's not what it means. Um, so yeah, just kind of like apprehensive, I guess, when the police showed up because I didn't know like if we were gonna get a warning or if it was gonna be the like maximum fine or what, just because of the area, I think definitely has an impact, and obviously, um, like I really think in that situation, like the police could have taken like the mining guys, words over hours, and like it's there's just always this like sort of anxiety and fear of like how society will respond to you and whether situations will be like altered for their benefit just because they would be believed. So it was just like a weird little tense situation, and then they wouldn't let us go the short way. So we had to walk like 2 miles back to the university in the dark. There was like no sidewalks. And yeah, there was like no escort or anything. So it just kind of felt like I was just really happy that my boyfriend was there because I felt like because he's like a very respectful, sort of like reserved young white man that was beneficial in that situation. Like I don't know what would happen if I was there by myself. So
Marcia told me you would talk to her about walking in the neighborhood and hear the clicking of doors locking. Could you tell me about what you know about
yeah,
that?
I think if even if people think they're not prejudiced or biased, that it's just very pervasive, like in media with what they choose to report on, that black and brown bodies are seen as more dangerous. Um, I think that's really clear to me that that's what people think, because without thinking, like, if we're, I don't know, walking out of a grocery store or walking, I don't know, into a bank or something, like, there's just, you just hear like the car doors lock, um, or somebody might, like pull their purse or bag like closer to themselves. And it's almost like a learned um, response that communicates like that we're dangerous or that we aren't well intentioned, etc. And it's not like this is a very dangerous community. Like I might think differently of that if we lived in an area with like notoriously high crime or something, because maybe then that person would do that for everybody. But I think it's just a sort of learned response that it's not humiliating in a way. It almost feels like, I don't know, maybe like it's almost a defeated feeling, that that you have to put so much more like energy and emotion into communicating that that you're not dangerous and that you are smart and that you are capable. Um, so it's almost just a little more tiring to be alive, I guess.
Do you think being a person of color in an overwhelmingly white area, do you feel like you have to go the extra step, be like even more, I don't know, I guess better at everything, work harder at school, work harder at jobs, work harder at being a better person, just to be accepted, just to sort of get by without having problems?
Definitely. I knew my ticket out of here would be education, and I worked really, really hard to be like in the top 10% of my class and to apply for every scholarship that I could apply for, and to sort of like win the favor, I guess, of people in the region, because I'm not athletic at all, but I can see that clearly sports are important in this area. And so I was like, gosh, what is the only thing I can do? So I started running, and I ran cross country, and you just sort of build this resume of, it's almost like you're preparing for a legal defense, and you're like gathering evidence of, I'm not dangerous, I can be a benefit to society, and um, like you should give me this position because I can do it. And so, yeah, I'd say um, that it has definitely motivated me to be like above and beyond.
You're a young person, you still in school. When you graduate, do you see yourself moving to a city? Do you see yourself maybe coming back to an area like this? What do you think you're going to do?
I think that looking at my major, it might be more beneficial for me to go to a city. There might be more job opportunities, although there is a big news desert. But um, yeah, I think I see myself. Um, it was a game changer for me to go to college, and to even though I'm like 45 minutes from Pittsburgh, I go to Pittsburgh a lot, and it's just so, like, you just feel a lot more comfortable
There's
seeing,
diversity there.
yeah, there's diversity there. And like I had stayed in Squirrel Hill before because I had friends there, and there's so many Jewish people, which is just really, it's just refreshing, honestly, to go to my boyfriend's church and to like meet this beautiful couple from Nigeria and just like other people, and just I love diversity, and I love my white brothers and sisters too, but I think cities are just so cool because it just almost has more of an accepting air, I think.
What's probably been the hardest part for you about growing up in an area like this?
Um, it's hard to feel like you have to speak on behalf of your entire race. Um, and it gets to be very exhausting. Um, just in school, every slavery unit, every like I don't know, part in the textbook where it would be brought up to have like everyone's eyes on you and um like they want to hear what you have to say, but I really yeah, and it's just hard to feel understood. Um and to me it was clear that um like history classes were failing us. Um in fifth grade, the entire year, the only thing we learned about was the Civil War in our history unit. And so you'd think that we would go really in depth into like the complexities of the economy and like how terrible Reconstruction was. And no, we just, we had reenactors come and this woman was like had cotton and she was making it into yarn and she was like, I know they're going to try to tell you that the Civil War is about slavery, but it's about the economy and states' rights. And even as a fifth grader, I was like, the economy was slaves and the states' rights was for slavery. So, and nobody corrected her. And, um, you know, I see a lot of Confederate flags everywhere as if like we're the South. And I don't think people, I don't know, maybe they don't like the government and that's why they're flying a Confederate flag, but I don't think they understand like what that communicates and what that feels like to see that, to feel like you're not welcome because even if you are advocating for like anti-government, it's like, do you realize like what the Confederate flag stood for? So, um, honestly, like growing up here and being one of the only people of color, it just feels like my respect isn't worth the discomfort of learning, or um, that you're just not really accepted and very misunderstood. I hear all the time, like, you don't sound black, as if articulation is reserved only for white people. I'm like, I don't know if you think that I should take that as a compliment, but I don't. And um, like you saying that is like if you would just think critically, why do you have this preconception that blacks should sound uneducated? It's probably because our communities aren't given enough resources and the educational system is uncared for versus white communities. So it's definitely it just feels like I said, lack of empathy, being overlooked, or just being a caricature, I guess, and just not thinking about how it feels, I guess.
And lastly, do you do you feel like you were heard at all? Like your voice was heard at all? Growing up around here.
So it wasn't until more recently that I felt heard because of my mother figure who she's white too, but she's always had like an appreciation for different cultures, even though she grew up near Port Trevorton, which is like super um racist. So yeah, she just tells me about stories of like her aunts and uncles who, like used to work in the coal mines and when they how they'd have nicknames. Their nicknames would like be the N word because they would come back like soot on their face and stuff. And so she grew up around that, and now she's a missionary in South Africa, and they're fresh from apartheid. And so she has a unique perspective where she understands like the complete ignorance of this area, and she also she's been very healing for me. Like I mentioned to her, how healing it is just to be heard, because people they like wrestle and they grapple with how do I make up for like the sins of my ancestors and like what should I say to somebody when they're mad at me about like slavery, which I wasn't around for, and I just want to communicate how you may not have participated in slavery, but you have the benefits of that system, and so we still bear the scars of that system, and so just almost like um, feeling that genuine heartbrokenness over what has happened, and you know, communicating that I recognize that the pain is deep and that there's something that needs to happen is just very healing, because when people try to say, oh, that happened so long ago, and the get over it mentality, I wasn't there, don't be mad at me mentality, is just very dismissive, and that's not how you would approach somebody else who is traumatized. Like if a woman was raped and says, I hate all men, like you wouldn't berate her and gaslight her. But when a broken and traumatized community um, may have the viewpoint that they hate all white people, even though all white people obviously aren't bad, like what you should do is approach that with empathy and with a listening ear, and like that's how the healing starts. So